I've been diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, which is like a cross between schizophrenia and bipolar. So I get symptoms of both. But like this is my third diagnosis. I've been diagnosed with, first of all, schizophrenia, then bipolar, and the latest is schizoaffective. So psychiatry is fairly fluid. It's not that uncommon for diagnoses to change as they learn more about my history and sort of are able to observe me a bit more.
What kind of symptoms do you experience?
Okay, well, I've experienced mania, depression, anxiety, psychosis, basically, a whole range of things.
And is it over a period of years? Or?
Yeah, I first became unwell in 2001. Well, that was the sickest I've ever been after the events of September 11.
Oh, okay.
And I became psychotic at that time.
Could you explain what you mean by psychotic?
Yeah. Well, basically, for me, it's quite different when you read literature about people becoming psychotic. It sort of talks about them losing touch with reality. Yeah. But as a person living in that experience, it doesn't feel like I've lost touch with reality. It actually felt like I gained a greater knowledge of the world. And it felt like I was more aware of the spiritual elements of the world and that there were all these spiritual forces in play which were really affecting my behaviour and the things I did.
So the reasons for things you
did. The reasons. And certainly my whole perception of the world changed dramatically, and everything I saw in the world took on a different sort of meaning. So animals, for example, they became either good or evil. In fact, anything in the world was quite polarised in that I either saw them as representing something good or representing something evil.
Okay. And this was all from 2001 onwards, September 11, or nothing in childhood?
I didn't experience anything like psychosis prior to 2001, but I had experienced depression when I was about 19. And now that I've experienced being well, I suppose, with the medications and things and the different things I've put in place, I realised that I was actually probably quite unwell for most of my adult life in one way or another, with depression or anxiety or different things.
And is it ongoing treatments at the moment, so like counselling and just medication, is that what it is? Or?
The treatment for me at the moment is primarily medication. I see a psychiatrist once a month, but I suppose I've had to put in a lot of things in place in my life over the past 8 years to really reduce the stress I experience, and I've got a lot of strategies to help monitor, my thought processes and my moods, and to help me deal with the fluctuations that occur because of my illness.
Cool. Yeah. And so, has it affected your everyday life? Like, kind of, obviously not your work, or has it affected your work at all? Or?
It has in an unusual way, I suppose, in that I feel like the fact that I've had the illness has really given my life a sense of direction. And as I said, I work in mental health at TAFE, but I'm really quite passionate about making a difference in the lives of people, like other people with mental illnesses, and really hoping to be able to educate people about some of the strategies I've used to help myself recover in order that it might help them. I'm also really keen to see a reduction in the stigma that exists in society with mental illness. So, I like to speak about that quite often and be quite open about my illness, because I think it can help work towards reducing stigma.
Yeah. Right. And so was that all just inside mentally, or was that shown by your actions? Did you do
No,
things?
I was just walking around and around in the hall, and it was all these thoughts going through my head. But it was all very, very real to me, and it was extremely frightening. And I have to say that, if anything, being in a place where you no longer know who your friends or enemies are is the most lonely place you can ever be. Like, I don't think anyone can ever imagine what it's like to get to that point where you're totally confused and you just don't know who to trust anymore.
Yeah.
It's like being in a protagonist in a movie where, you know, there's all corruption and what have you happening around, and you don't know who is on your side and who's not. And yeah, it was an extremely lonely, terrifying place to be.
Okay, and was that the way you saw your friends and family as well? So people who knew you, loved you and were with you, you kind of thought they might be against you as well?
When I decided that your enemies were your friends because they caused you to change, I started to think, well, then who are your friends? Are they your enemies? And I started to think, well, if your friends are your enemies, does that mean that my family are my enemies? Are they actually there existing to harm me?
Yeah.
And I found it very difficult. I just didn't know where to turn.
Regardless of what what your family would have said to you, that they loved you and whatnot, you still found them hard to trust.
And I suppose at the time I'd been under pressure to go to a doctor because my husband had noticed differences in my behaviour, and he'd called my dad around, and everyone was pressuring me to go and get help.
They take it on against you.
And it was.
Intrusion?
No one would believe me when I said that I had a direct connection with God, and and I can understand that now, that I'm not psychotic, but at the time it was my reality. My reality was that I had this direct connection with God, and that we were facing a world of spiritual powers and what have you, that were happening all around us, and it was up to me to try and fix the world and get out of it, and restore peace.
And now some would say what you have, or depression in general, other mental illnesses, might be genetic. So would you say that you kind of had someone in your family who's had it, or do you think your daughters might suffer from the same thing? Or
well, it's always a concern for me. I'm not sure. There's certainly been other members of the family who've had depression. I certainly don't know of any other diagnoses of schizoaffective in my family. But I don't know a lot about my dad's side of the family, as he was a foster child. I really hate the thought that my children would have to suffer the way I've suffered with the illness. But I think all I can really do is try to be a good role model for them, and see that I've been able to turn such a negative thing in my life into something quite positive. And I feel like I'm actually at a point in my life today that far exceeds anything I would have achieved if I hadn't had the illness. As far as the richness of my experience of life is concerned, and even the things I do.
And so amongst all this upset and all the trauma you've gone through, do you see yourself now stronger and educating not only what you do in your occupation but also your children? So is that how you see yourself also coping with it, by letting them know, although you went through episodes back a couple of years ago, now that you're a bit better, do you see yourself kind of explaining to your daughters what happened back then?
Well, my daughters are starting to get older now, and I'm able to explain a bit more to them. When I first became psychotic in 2001, my older daughter was only 3. And I really drew her in a lot on my delusions and hallucinations and the things. And I think it would have been quite frightening for a 3-year-old. But now she's 11, I can explain a bit more about what happened to me and what I have to deal with on daily basis, and they're actually a lot more understanding now, you know, if I'm tired, if I need to rest, which is important in trying to manage the illness. They're a lot more understanding and
taking it in.
Yeah.
Probably. Okay.